Getting a sensor alarm on my car right now. Let's see if it'll actually show up right now. A lot of times it only pops up when I'm driving. It says service stabilitrak. So let's see if it shows up. No, I unfortunately cannot show you guys because it's not showing up here. Not showing up at all. A lot of times it pops up when I'm driving, and by doing some research I found that it's actually, let me turn the air down so you guys can hear me here, that it's actually a wheel bearing, so I'm going to be replacing that today. And here are some of the tools I'm going to use for the job. First of all, it's actually, the car is a 2015 Chevrolet Malibu that I will be working on today. That has given me the service stabilitrak sensor alarm, and it is actually the wheel bearing. So we'll use a couple socket sets here, and I'll show you guys the exact sizes when I get to that. Impact. So here's just some of the tools, of course. So impact. I have a bit set. This is a smaller one. Smaller set right here, with all your basic bits pretty much, and then a couple Milwaukee sets in case I don't have them in my smaller set. Here's the actual wheel bearing. The one that I bought was the Duralast Gold. I like putting the better quality on. They only cost a little bit more, plus it comes with a 3-year warranty and not a 1-year warranty, which the cheaper one has, and it's only $30 cheaper. This part that I just purchased yesterday was $180, I think it was $182 for the wheel bearing. If you get this put on somewhere, it could range you around $700–800 for the job if you have someone else install this. So I'm saving quite a bit of money doing this myself. Alright, so we'll move on to the other tools that I have here. Some wire brushes. We'll need that to remove some rust, things like that. Depends where you live if you'll actually need these. I know some areas they don't really need them and the part will actually come right off. And then a torque wrench here. Torque all the nuts to spec and bolts to spec. So I have a little pad for my knees, so I'm not doing this. And I have a 4-way, so I can remove the tire here. And then we have a hammer, mallet, little crowbar. And then I like using this here in case I can't get the brake caliper back on. Like if it's too tight, too snug, I'll just squeeze in the caliper pistons a little bit in order to get it back, to go back on easier, because a lot of times it's so snug that it's very difficult to get on. I use this as like a cheat to squeeze in that piston just a hair and then slide it on. It's way easier doing that. Alright, let's get to removing this tire, and I'll show you guys. I'll speed things up and then show you guys once I get the tire off here. So I've had a lot of people ask where you jack up a car at. So here's the front tire. If you look just behind the front tire here, let me get underneath, move this out of the way. So if you look just behind the front tire right here, right behind it, you will see this groove here. This is where you want to put the jack at. So you want to put it right here and center it right there where that groove is. Hopefully you guys can see that. So you're going to center it right there, jack it up, and then use your jack stands as a safety. A lot of times, you know, you can put it under there, then move the jack, of course. But I like to have two things just to be sure in case one gives out. Of course, this big old jack stand, brand new jack, it's probably not going to give out. but I don't like taking my chances. So next, after you've removed the tire, I'm going to remove the caliper and the bracket. So I'm going to remove both of these. The size of the bracket bolt is 14 millimeter. So we'll go ahead and remove those. I believe it's 14 millimeter. I'll double check in a second for the caliper. We're going to remove both of these here, the caliper and the caliper bracket, so we can get to the rotor. That way we can remove the rotor, and then we'll have to remove a couple other things so we can actually get to the bearing itself. Alright, now I was way off. So the this is the caliper bracket right here, and this, oops, not that one. This is where you remove the caliper bolts at. Right back here is the caliper bracket. This right here, caliper bracket bolts right here. And that is actually size 21. So I'm going to get those loose, remove the bracket, and then we'll go from there. Start working on the rotor, pulling that off. Sorry it's a little loud because of the fan, but now we're going to remove, once you have the caliper bracket off that was right here, we're going to remove this this screw or the bolt from right here with a T30 bit. So we're going to take that off, and that's how you remove the rotor. So we're going to pull that off. Alright, so after I removed the rotor here, I used a 18 millimeter socket to remove this tie rod in. So when you go to remove it, pull the nut off and then barely tap on the bottom of this tie rod end. Barely tap on it with a hammer, and then it'll pop loose. And then you can just pull it right out of here, and then set it out of the way for right now. Next, you're going to remove the axle nut, which is right here. I already removed it with a 32 millimeter socket. That's going to take quite a bit of pressure to break loose. So yeah, you're going to take that off next. You're going to do that after you remove the tie rod arm. Next, we're going to need to remove these strut bolts, this one and this one here. Well, that's a nut and that's a nut. The bolts are on this side. So we're going to remove those. Those are 18 millimeters, so we're going to need to use a 18 millimeter wrench on one side and 18 millimeter impact socket on the other side. So I'm going to be removing this right here, and then the one right below that. Alright, so like I said before, after you get the old bearing out, you're just going to go in reverse order and put everything back together. So what I did was you have to make sure that you have to put this plate back on. So this goes behind the bearing. So let's see if we can turn it here. Okay, so you're going to put this plate on, put the bearing on, and then put those 3 bolts back in that hold the bearing in place. Once you're finished with that, you're going to put this shaft, turn it again, you're going to put this shaft back in here, back in the middle of the bearing. Make sure that the teeth line up, and then get it back in place exactly where it was before you pulled the old one out. Once you're done with that, you're going to put this bolt in and this bolt in, the 2 bolts that we removed previously. So like I said, get the bearing put back in with the 3 bolts. Those have to be put in at 74 foot-pounds of torque. So use a torque wrench, get those set in place, 74 foot-pounds of torque, like I said. And these 2 bolts, I believe they're 74 also. I'm getting ready to check the specs because I'm getting ready to torque those down. I will let you guys know in just a second what these are here and what the tie rod arm is supposed to be set at as well. Okay, so I just checked the strut bolts here. Those are actually supposed to be torqued. Sorry, I know it's going blurry there. But this one, hold on one second. This one here and this one here are supposed to be at 89 foot-pounds torque. So use your torque wrench and a wrench. So you have to torque wrench one side, wrench on the other, tighten them down to 89. And then I'll get back to you when I'm done with that, and then we'll double check the tie rod in. I want to show you guys something with the torque wrenches as well. A lot of people do not know, and I've had questions on multiple times here. So with the torque wrench, at least the one that I have here, you're going to set how many foot-pounds, and it says it right here, the diagram does. I think it starts around 60 and then goes up to, it looks like 150 foot-pounds. So you're just going to turn this to what you want it at, and then wherever you want to stop, you're going to tighten this. And then whenever you're ready to set the foot-pounds of torque, so like let's say you need 89, I just set mine at 90. But then you're going to pull on this, and you'll hear the wrench crack. Right there. That means you're tight enough, exactly where you're supposed to be, so stop. Do not keep pulling or anything. I'll do it one more time. You hear it crack like that, and you can feel it give a little bit in the ratchet here on the end. You can feel it give. So if you get one of these from your auto parts store, as soon as it gives like that, it makes that noise, you want to stop, because that's it's telling you that it's at the point where you set it at. So if I set mine at 90, it's cracking at that. That means there's 90 foot-pounds of torque put on the bolt there, bolt and nut. And the tie rod, I'm getting ready to put in here. So I'm going to slide it in here, put the nut on. That has to be torqued to 39 foot-pounds. So I'm going to put this nut on, tighten it in place, and use my torque wrench to crank it to 39 foot-pounds of torque. Alright, so we got everything together here. Got the rotor put on. We're going to put this nut on right here that holds the shaft in place. We're going to put that on about as tight as you can get it on. This little bolt here that holds the rotor in place, you're going to tighten that down. I mean, you can use an impact, tighten it down, just don't overdo it, because you might break the bolt or strip it out or something, tear it up. So now we're going to put on the caliper bracket, which is the 2 bolts that we removed earlier, right in here and right down here, right behind the rotor. So we're going to tighten those down to spec as well. That will be 85 foot-pounds of torque on our torque wrench. So I'm going to tighten those down, get the bracket on here, and then I will show you guys my little trick with the caliper here. Easiest way to get that back on there. Alright guys, I removed the zip ties I had holding the caliper in here. So this is what I normally do. I take this clamp, or one similar to this, and I use it to squeeze this piston in right here. Now it's not sticking out very far because I just did the brake pads on my car on both sides here. So I won't have to move it at all, if any. But let's say, you know, it's sticking out an inch or inch and a half. You may have to. Now, especially if you're doing your brakes at the same time as doing, like, you know, changing your rotors or changing out the wheel bearing, then of course you're gonna have to squeeze this in. So I use this right here, and I put the backside here, and then I slowly squeeze it in. Now I also remove the cap from the brake fluid container that's under the hood there. So especially if you're going to do the brake pads on both sides and you're going to be moving this in, let's say I don't know, an inch, inch and a half on both sides. I do that in case I need to remove any excess liquid that's in the brake fluid container, or if I am adding too much pressure. Like let's say if I'm squeezing these in, I don't want the cap on there. I don't want to make it a mess or whatever. So I also keep an eye on the level of the fluid in case I need to remove just a little bit. Alright, so I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to put the 2 bolts back in place on this bracket here, right here. So that's what I'm going to do right now, and then put the tire back on. Now the caliper bolts that I just put this caliper back in place, the bolts that hold it in place, we're going to torque those to 30 foot-pounds of torque, and then put the tire back on, and the job is done.